I pulled into my driveway at 6:10 a.m., the sky still bleeding from night into dawn, and there it was, a massive for sale HOA auction sign hammered right into my front pasture. My pasture, two strangers in reflective vests were pacing around with clipboards, snapping photos of my barn, my cattle, my father's old windmill, like they were cataloging it for someone else's dream. And there she stood, Karen Whitfield, HOA, president of Maplewood Heights, waving her phone like a badge of authority. When she saw me, her face went pale, then smug. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "you're trespassing on HOA property." I just stared at her, the Montana dust still on my boots. My father's ashes were barely cold, and now this. They thought I was gone long enough to erase 3 generations of Morrison history. They thought wrong. Before I tell you how I turned their fake auction into a federal arrest, comment your city and local time below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true HOA stories that'll make your jaw drop. When my father passed, I promised myself one thing: I'd bury him beside the old cottonwood tree, right where he'd taught me to ride before my legs were long enough to reach the stirrups. That tree was the heart of our ranch, the same 47 acres my grandfather fenced by hand in 1967. For 3 generations, we'd worked that land sunrise to sundown through drought, fire, and taxes, but never, not once, had we bowed to a homeowners association. That was supposed to be our legacy. I left for Montana on a cold Thursday morning to lay my father to rest. My 16-year-old daughter Emma stayed behind to take care of the cattle and keep an eye on the place. She's tougher than she looks. Brown hair like her mother's, stubbornness like mine. Before I left, she made me promise not to worry. I told her, the land knows who it belongs to. Turns out that line aged poorly. While I was gone, Maplewood Heights, HOA, the shiny suburban development that crept right up to my southern fence, decided my property was abandoned. Their president, Karen Whitfield, had been gunning for my ranch for months. First, she complained about the smell of manure, then the sound of my tractor. Then she said my gravel driveway disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. I ignored every notice. You can't reason with people who think the smell of soil is an offense. But Karen wasn't the kind of person who took no as an answer. She was the kind who weaponized paperwork. According to what I later found out, she called an emergency HOA meeting the day after my father's funeral. She told the board I had vacated the premises indefinitely, and that under the Maplewood Covenant, the HOA had the right to assume stewardship of any adjoining, unmaintained property. It was complete fiction. There was no such clause. But she drafted her own forfeiture notice, printed it on HOA letterhead, and mailed it to herself, claiming I'd been officially notified. That's when she crossed from petty to criminal. Emma called me 2 days later, her voice shaking. "Dad, there are people in the field. They're measuring the barn with tape. There's a big sign in the yard that says, 'For sale, HOA auction.'" I nearly dropped the phone. "Stay inside," I told her. "Lock the door, don't talk to anyone, and film everything you see." I was 800 miles away, standing beside my father's fresh grave in Montana, listening to a stranger's voice echo through my daughter's phone as they shouted HOA terms on my own land. Something in me snapped. I got in my truck, said a silent apology to my father, and drove straight through the night. No music, no stops, just road and rage. Somewhere around Cheyenne, I started piecing it together. Karen had always eyed my land like a realtor eyes commission. She ran a real estate consultancy on the side, and rumor was she'd been in talks with developers to expand Maplewood Heights further west. My property was the only thing standing in their way, 47 acres of private untamed land that didn't fit her HOA fantasy. I imagined her smug smile as she hammered that auction sign into my soil. The same smile she wore when she fined me $250 for keeping a tractor parked in view of the street. By the time I hit the Colorado border, the sun hadn't even risen. My headlights cut through fog that clung to the fields like smoke. The closer I got, the more my stomach twisted. Emma's last text came at 5:47 a.m. "Dad, she's back. She brought 2 men. They're taking pictures of the barn." When I turned onto our gravel road, I saw the blue and white HOA van parked right beside my mailbox. The words Maplewood Heights Community Authority gleamed under my high beams like a punchline to a bad joke. The first thing I saw when I pulled in was my father's old red barn, and right in front of it, the sign, "For sale, HOA auction Saturday, 9 a.m. They even listed my property's parcel number. 2 men in vests looked up when they saw my truck. One of them raised a clipboard like he was showing a badge. "Sorry, sir, this is a restricted area until after the auction." Restricted. I stepped out, boots crunching the gravel. This land's been Morrison property since Lyndon Johnson was in office. Karen came striding out from behind my fence like she owned the place, phone in hand, pearls glinting even in the low light. "Mr. Morrison, you're back earlier than expected. Guess I ruined your open house," I said flatly. "You're trespassing," she snapped. "This ranch has been forfeited under HOA authority. You're in violation of multiple community codes, including sanitation fencing and—" "Stop," I said, raising a hand. "You and I both know that's nonsense." She crossed her arms, lips tight. "We have legal documents. $47,000 in unpaid fines. You can appeal, but it won't stop the sale." That's when she called 911. I heard her say the words "armed trespasser" on HOA property like she was reporting a bank robbery. Within 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled up Deputy Maria Santos, whom I'd met once before when a stray calf wandered into Maplewood's flower beds. She recognized me immediately. "Morning, Jake," she said cautiously. "What's going on?" Karen rushed forward, waving her phone. "This man is on HOA property. We have legal forfeiture documents, and he's threatening." Maria held up a hand. "Ma'am, slow down." She turned to me. "Jake," I handed her my land deed tax receipts and the 1967 boundary survey laminated from age. "Same land, same line, same family," I said. Karen pulled out a folder thicker than a phone book. "This," she said, "is the official HOA record. The Maplewood Heights Community Authority has legally annexed this parcel. It's all here." Maria flipped through it, brow furrowing. "Where's the county seal?" "The assessor's verification," Karen blinked. "It's under review." Maria sighed. "Ma'am, this isn't enforceable. You can't annex private property without county approval. This is a civil matter, not criminal. Nobody's being arrested today." Karen's face turned scarlet. "You're making a mistake. We'll see you in court." She spun on her heel and stormed off toward her van, barking at the men to pack up the signage. As they left, Maria turned to me and lowered her voice. "Jake, she's walking a thin line. Get yourself a lawyer. Fast. And document everything, dates, letters, photos. She's setting herself up for a fall." I nodded, already ahead of her. When she drove off, I stood there in the quiet dawn, staring at the churned-up tire marks cutting through my pasture. The frost glittered on the grass, the air smelled like iron and dust. I could still hear my father's voice from years ago. A man's land is his promise to his family. Never let anyone rewrite that. I looked toward the house. Emma was at the door, phone in hand, eyes wide, but steady. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded. "I filmed everything. That's my girl." I walked up, wrapped an arm around her, and looked back at the sign lying face down in the dirt. I didn't know it yet, but that piece of plywood would be Exhibit A in the case that tore Maplewood Heights apart. Because Karen Whitfield had just picked a fight with the wrong rancher. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's smirk and that sign sticking out of my soil like a spear. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through my deed again and again. 47 acres recorded in my father's name, in 1967 transferred to me in 2012. Taxes paid, fences, intact cattle fed. "Nothing in that stack of paper," said HOA property. But Karen Whitfield didn't need facts. She needed control. By sunrise, she'd already sent another email to the community list, calling me a hostile squatter on HOA-administered land. I only found out because my neighbor Bill Foster printed it out and dropped it on my porch like a warning letter from the front lines. Bill's a good man, retired surveyor, lives 3 parcels over. He's the kind of guy who can tell you which direction the wind's blowing by, how the cows stand. He knocked on the door, hat in hand. "Heard about the circus yesterday," he said. "Karen's been talking big, says she's got a court order." I poured him coffee. "Court order my ass." "Yeah," he said, lowering his voice. "Funny thing about that order, no one in the county office has ever heard of it. Clerk says she filed something, but it got bounced back for missing verification. She's faking legal documents now." Bill gave me a slow grin. Wouldn't be the first time someone in Maplewood thought an HOA rule outranked the Constitution. We both laughed, but there was no humor in it. At 9:30 a.m., the rumble of an SUV broke the quiet. Karen's black Lexus rolled up the drive spotless, as always her HOA badge clipped to her lapel like she was federal law. 3 other cars followed, 2 HOA board members, and a man in khakis carrying a stack of folders. Emma peeked through the blinds. "Dad?" They brought backup. I stepped out to the porch, coffee mug in hand. "Morning, Karen. You forget to return my shovel, or are we digging new lies today?" Her eyes narrowed. "You think this is funny? You're standing on HOA-governed soil. You have until noon to vacate before we impose fines for non-compliance. Non-compliance with what I asked. Owning my own house. The man in khakis cleared his throat. Mr. Morrison, I'm here to represent the HOA Legal Advisory Committee. The association has determined your property falls within the Maplewood Heights covenant boundary as of the 2021 revision. You've accumulated $47,000 in outstanding penalties for code violations and unauthorized use of land. I looked at him. And who signed that revision? He flipped a page. You did, sir. That's when I laughed out loud. Really, you have my signature. He turned the paper around. And there it was, Jake Morrison scrawled in perfect cursive. The problem was, I write in block letters. Always have. That's cute, I said. You practice that yourself, Karen stepped forward. Watch your tone. We tried to handle this amicably, but you've ignored every notice. The HOA will proceed with its internal hearing regardless of your attitude. Hearing, I repeated. You mean the kangaroo court you run in your community hall? She smirked. You'll get your chance to present evidence. I took a slow sip of coffee. Don't worry. I'll bring plenty. And right on cue, the sound of tires crunching gravel filled the air again, a county cruiser pulling up behind her Lexus. Deputy Maria Santos stepped out, hat tucked under her arm, and gave Karen a look that could slice through marble. Morning, folks, she said. Got a report of an ongoing civil dispute. Miss Whitfield, that from you, yes, Deputy, Karen said, straightening her blazer. We have an unlawful occupant refusing to comply with HOA directives. Maria looked at me, then back at Karen. Unlawful occupant, Karen gestured grandly toward my front porch. This property has been legally forfeited. He's trespassing on HOA-managed land. Maria let out a slow breath. All right, show me your paperwork. Karen thrust a manila folder into her hands like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Maria flipped through it, her brow arching higher with every page. No county stamp, no clerk verification, no assessor number. Ma'am, this isn't a court order. This is an internal HOA memo. Karen's face tightened. We're a recognized community authority. Our bylaws give us jurisdiction over HOA members, Maria cut in, not over private landowners. And unless this ranch joined Maplewood Heights, you've got no authority here. Karen's voice cracked. You're misunderstanding. I understand perfectly, Maria said, closing the folder. Ma'am, this is a civil issue. You've got no grounds for enforcement. I'm going to ask you to leave Mr. Morrison's property and settle this in court, not on his lawn. Karen's nostrils flared. This isn't over. It never is, I said under my breath. She spun on her heel, muttering into her phone. Her little entourage followed, whispering. I caught one of them, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline, glancing nervously at the fake signature before tucking the papers under his arm. When the convoy finally disappeared down the road, Maria turned to me. You need to lawyer up, Jake. She's crossed a legal line, and people like her never quit till someone nails them for it. I'll call one today, I said. Good, she nodded. And keep your daughter out of it as much as you can. Emma stepped out right then, chin raised. Too late for that. I already posted the video. Maria blinked. Video, Emma grinned. The one from this morning, Karen trespassing, yelling about forfeiture. Tommy from next door helped me upload it to YouTube. I didn't know whether to scold her or shake her hand. By lunchtime, the video had 50,000 views. By dinner, 200,000. Title: HOA President tries to sell active ranch owner's land, gets caught live. Comments poured in typical Karen energy. She's about to learn what private property means. Bro lawyer, up fast. For once, the internet was on my side. That evening, my phone buzzed non-stop. Channel 9 News called. Then, Denver Post. Everyone wanted a quote. I gave them one. If the HOA wants my ranch, they can buy it from my lawyer after he's done suing them. The next morning, I woke to find another HOA notice shoved under my door. Emergency board meeting. 7 p.m. Attendance required. Required. That word made me laugh, but I went anyway. The Maplewood Community Hall looked like a church where people went to worship control. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 5 board members sat at a long table like a jury of suburban gods. Karen sat in the middle, pearls, gleaming gavel in hand. Mr. Morrison, she began this hearing, will determine whether your property remains under HOA authority pending sale. Let me save you time, I said, setting my deed on the table. It doesn't, and it won't. Her lips curled. You've ignored repeated citations for violation of HOA Code Section 14B, livestock nuisance, improper fencing, non-conforming driveway materials, Karen, I interrupted. You realize none of your rules apply to me, right? Gasps echoed. One of the board members, a younger woman named Patricia Vance, leaned forward. He's right, she said quietly. His parcel's never been listed under our jurisdiction. Karen shot her a glare. Noted. But the updated survey from 2022 places his southern boundary inside Maplewood Heights. The HOA has voted. Who did the survey? I asked. Robert Kumar, licensed professional, she said. I'll be sure to ask him about that, I replied. Because I've got the 1967 survey here, county sealed. My fence line hasn't moved an inch in 58 years. Bill Foster, my neighbor, worked for the state land office back in the 72nds. He'll testify. Karen's voice wavered. The board has already voted 3-1 in favor of annexation. Vance spoke up again. For the record, I voted no. Karen banged her gavel. Then it's settled. I gathered my papers, smiled, and said, "You just voted to commit fraud. Congratulations." As I walked out, I heard whispers ripple through the room. The fight was only beginning, but for the first time since my father's funeral, I felt alive. They wanted a war over land. They were about to get one. The so-called hearing in Maplewood's community hall was supposed to be procedural, a civil discussion, Karen said. But when I walked into that fluorescent-lit room that evening, it felt more like a courtroom built out of paranoia and cheap folding chairs. The HOA banner hung crooked above the head table, 5 board members sitting like a jury who already knew the verdict. The whole setup reminded me of a high school student council meeting that had gotten drunk on power. I could see how they were lined up: Karen Whitfield, president, and self-appointed queen of Maplewood Heights. Robert Stanton, vice president, stiff as his pressed khakis. Jennifer Walsh, secretary, typing furiously into her laptop. Sarah Chen, treasurer, eyes darting nervously between papers. Patricia Vance, board member, calm but clearly uncomfortable. Karen cleared her throat like she was addressing the United Nations. This emergency meeting is hereby called to order. The purpose to finalize disciplinary action and sale authorization concerning Parcel 12B, formerly occupied by Mr. Jake Morrison. Formerly, I said, pulling out my chair. You might want to check your verb tenses. I still live there. She ignored me. We'll begin with opening statements. Stanton stood puffing his chest. The association has determined that Mr. Morrison's ranch property violates multiple community codes, including noise, odor, and environmental contamination. In addition, his structures fail to meet visual standards outlined in the Maplewood Aesthetic Covenant. I couldn't help but chuckle. You mean my barn smells like livestock? Imagine that, a barn with cows near it. A few people in the back laughed quietly before Karen silenced them with a glare. We'll have order, she said. I placed my weathered leather folder on the table, the same one my father used whenever he renewed grazing permits. Since we're playing courtroom, here's my opening statement. I flipped open the deed, the 1967 survey map, and 3 decades of tax receipts. This property has been Morrison land for 58 years. It predates Maplewood Heights, predates your HOA charter, and predates most of your residents. You can't annex what was never yours. Karen's lips twitched. Mr. Morrison, the HOA, voted last year to extend its boundary lines through a certified land survey. Your parcel now falls within Maplewood Heights. Patricia Vance shifted in her chair. I still don't remember approving that vote, she said softly. Walsh stopped typing, looking uncertain. It was a closed session, right? Karen snapped. Yes, and it passed 3-1. Discussion closed. I slid the laminated survey across the table. Here's the problem, Karen. Your so-called certified survey was done by Robert Kumar, a man I called this morning. He told me he's never stepped foot on my ranch. And your 2021 covenant revision, the one with my signature, nice forgery work. Too bad I print in block letters, not cursive. For the first time, I saw her composure crack. She leaned forward, eyes flashing. Accusing the HOA of fraud is a serious matter. Good, I said, because that's exactly what I'm doing. Stanton stood again. Jake, be reasonable. We're trying to keep Maplewood uniform. You've got barbed wire fences, rusty equipment, cattle runoff near our walking path. Your walking path is 100 yards from my property line, I interrupted. And that runoff. It's a stream that's been there since before any of you built your cul-de-sacs. Vance interjected quietly. Karen, maybe we should review the original county maps before making any final decisions. Karen slammed the gavel. Enough. We've given Mr. Morrison multiple opportunities to comply. The HOA hereby imposes a penalty of $47,000 for accumulated violations and authorizes the continued auction process scheduled for Saturday. That was it, the sham verdict. I stood slowly gathering my papers. You're voting to steal from a dead man's son. You realize that, right? No one spoke. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Chen's hands trembled slightly. Stanton avoided eye contact. I leaned closer to the microphone at the table. You think this meeting makes it legal? All you've done is record evidence against yourselves. Congratulations, you just admitted to conspiracy on video. Walsh stopped typing, frozen. This is being recorded. Oh, absolutely, I said, pointing to the small GoPro mounted on my chest pocket. For transparency, of course. Karen's jaw dropped. That's not authorized, neither was your auction, I said, smiling. Before she could respond, the doors at the back of the hall burst open. Bill Foster, my neighbor, walked in, carrying a large tube under his arm. Sorry to interrupt, he said loudly, but I think you all forgot something. He unrolled a faded county survey map across the table. This is the official 1,967 plat, county sealed, still in records. Morrison Ranch Lot 18, separate from Maplewood development boundaries by 87 feet. You can't just redraw lines because you don't like the view. Karen turned red. You're not a member of this association, Bill smiled. Exactly, that's why I still have common sense. Laughter rippled through the small crowd at the back residents who had come out of curiosity and stayed for the show. Karen slammed her gavel again, but the sound only drew more chuckles. I took that moment to drop my final piece of evidence, the letter from Deputy Maria Santos confirming that my property was outside HOA jurisdiction. Signed by law enforcement, I said. You'll need more than your newsletter to overrule that. Karen clenched her teeth. You're finished, Mr. Morrison. No, I said, gathering my things. You are. I walked out of that hall with Bill beside me, leaving the board to stew in their self-righteous fumes. The night air felt cooler than it had in weeks. The stars stretched wide above the dark silhouettes of the foothills. You think they'll actually go through with the auction? Bill asked. Oh, they'll try, I said. But they just turned it into a federal crime scene without realizing it. Because the thing about fraud is once it's written down, it's no longer gossip, it's evidence. The next morning, I met Maria at the sheriff's office. She looked up from her desk and raised an eyebrow. Heard about your performance last night. Word travels fast. She handed me a cup of burnt coffee. You stirred a hornet's nest. Karen called us again this morning, said you were intimidating the HOA board. I reviewed the footage you sent. She's the one breaking property laws, not you. Then maybe it's time someone tells her that in a way she understands, I said. Maria smiled faintly. Careful, Jake. People like her think a clipboard's stronger than the law until the law knocks on their door. I nodded. Then maybe I'll help the law find that door. By the time I got home, Emma was waiting with her laptop. Dad, look at this. She turned the screen toward me. The video from last night's meeting already had over 500,000 views. The comments were brutal. This HOA thinks they run the government. That rancher's my spirit animal. Someone call the feds already. Even Channel 9 had picked it up again, this time under the headline, Rancher Fights Back Against HOA Power Grab. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide shift. Karen tried to play damage control, posting on the Maplewood forum that misinformation was spreading and that the Morrison property situation is being handled through proper legal channels. But the more she spoke, the deeper the hole she dug. Residents began to whisper. Some even emailed me privately, sharing their own horror stories, bogus fines, selective enforcement threats over paint colors. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. Still, I knew better than to celebrate early. Karen wasn't finished. She was just regrouping. And sure enough, the following morning, a fresh letter appeared taped to my gate, Notice of Final Enforcement Action. The Maplewood Heights Community Authority will proceed with auction on scheduled date per board vote. Failure to comply may result in legal seizure. I ripped it down, crumpled it in my hand, and looked toward the horizon. All right, Karen, I muttered. You've had your hearing. Now you'll get mine. Because if she wanted a war of paperwork, I had something stronger, the truth, a camera, and a lifetime's worth of grit. And this time I wasn't fighting alone. The morning after the trial, I woke up to the sound of diesel engines. For a split second, I thought it was one of my old ranch hands hauling feed. But when I looked out the window, what I saw made my blood pressure spike. 2 Maplewood HOA maintenance trucks, parked right outside my gate, hazard lights blinking, workers unloading orange cones and tape, marked HOA restricted zone. I threw on my jacket, grabbed my phone, and stormed outside. Morning, gentlemen, I said, my voice flat as a hammer. You lost or just trespassing for sport today? One of them, a nervous young guy with a Maplewood vest, stammered, Miss. Whitfield said we're supposed to secure the perimeter for the auction. Perimeter, I repeated, pointing at the ground. You mean my fence, the same one that's been standing here since 1967, he hesitated. We're just following orders, sir. Then here's a new order, I said. Pack up your cones before you get cited for criminal trespass. And this time, that's a real law. The kid looked relieved, nodded quickly, and loaded the cones back into the truck. But his older coworker glared at me as they left. "This ain't over, man," he muttered. I smiled. "You're right. It's not." Because that morning was when I decided to stop playing defense. I called Bill Foster first. He answered on the second ring. "You sound like a man about to cause trouble," he said. "Not trouble," I replied. "Justice." Bill laughed. "Those two things usually overlap." Within an hour, he was at my kitchen table with his old survey gear, a cracked tripod, a compass, and a roll of yellowing maps that smelled like dust and history. Emma made coffee while Bill spread the papers across the table. "There," he said, pointing to a faded red line. "Your southern fence hasn't moved in 58 years. I can vouch for it. I helped your dad restake it back in 78 when the county repaved the main road. And Maplewood's survey, I asked." "Garbage," he said. "Whoever drew it didn't even use the correct datum point. It's like they eyeballed it from Google Maps." That made me grin. "Perfect. Let's prove it." So we spent the rest of the day walking the property line. Bill took photos, measurements, GPS coordinates, even drone shots that Tommy, our resident YouTuber neighbor, volunteered to capture. We marked every old post, every fence corner, every tree root that had been there since before I was born. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge, we had a stack of evidence thicker than any HOA binder Karen could wave around. And as luck or karma would have it, Tommy had been live streaming parts of our survey. The video title "HOA Gets Schooled" by Rancher and Old Surveyor, live. By sunset, it had 200,000 views. That night, I got a call from Deputy Maria. "You've stirred the pot again, Jake." "I'm not stirring," I said. "I'm just returning the spoon." She chuckled. "Well, your spoon's gone viral." That live stream hit local news. HOA's phones are lighting up. "Good," I said. "Maybe Karen will choke on her own PR." Maria's tone softened. "Just be careful. People like her double down when they're cornered." She wasn't wrong. The next morning I drove into town for supplies, and when I came back my mailbox was gone. Just gone. In its place was a small white placard removed per HOA Code Section 3 amperes, non-conforming mailbox materials. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of the truck. They'd stolen a mailbox. Emma came out holding her phone. "Dad, you're trending again." The video Tommy posted of me holding the empty mailbox post like a trophy had already hit 500,000 views. The comments were a battlefield of HOA horror stories. People from all over the country shared photos of absurd fines, fake citations, and power-tripping board members. It was like the internet had turned into a support group for the oppressed. But that wasn't the victory. The victory came when local Channel 9 News showed up unannounced, a camera crew in tow. "Mr. Morrison," the reporter said, "we're doing a follow-up on your situation with the Maplewood Heights HOA. Is it true they're still proceeding with the auction?" I nodded toward the driveway. "They can auction the sign, not the soil." Her eyes widened. "You mean?" I pointed. Karen's auction banner was gone. In its place stood my brand new sign painted in bold black letters: "Private, property federal land, trust registered. Trespassers will be filmed and reported." She filmed that, and it aired that evening. By the next morning, my phone blew up again. Local attorneys, journalists, and even a few ex-HOA board members from other states wanted to talk. One message stood out from Sarah Chen, attorney, Denver Property Law Group. "Mr. Morrison I, specialize in title disputes. I've reviewed your case. I believe Maplewood's claim violates state and federal land registry statutes. I'd like to meet." Sarah arrived 2 days later. She was sharp navy blazer, wireframe glasses, and a presence that screamed competent. She studied my documents for an hour before speaking. "Jake," she said, "finally, your case is cleaner than they realize. Maplewood's covenant stops 50 feet short of your property line. I checked the county plats myself. So why are they so confident?" I asked. She slid a copy of the 2021 covenant revision across the table. "Because someone forged your signature and attached a fake approval seal. Whoever did this wanted to make it look official enough to scare off opposition." I felt my jaw tighten. "Karen." "Most likely," Sarah said. "But here's the kicker: this revision was never filed with the county clerk. It's just a PDF they passed around internally." Emma leaned forward. "So, everything they've done is illegal?" Sarah nodded. "Completely." I exhaled slowly. "Then let's make it public." She smiled. "That's the spirit." That weekend, Tommy helped edit a new video. We titled it, "HOA Karen Forged My Signature Lawyer Exposes the Fraud Proof Inside." We included side-by-side comparisons of my real signature and the forged one footage of the fake survey, and Bill explaining how boundary law works. It exploded. 1 million views in 48 hours. By Monday morning, Maplewood's reputation was toast. Karen tried to issue a press release claiming the forgery was a clerical error, but that only made things worse. More neighbors came forward, sharing stories about bogus fines, threats, and worst of all, Karen's private real estate company quietly flipping foreclosed HOA homes for profit. It all started connecting. Her so-called auction wasn't about enforcing rules, it was a money-making scheme. Sarah filed an emergency injunction that same afternoon, freezing all HOA actions pending investigation. She also sent a formal complaint to the county district attorney's office citing potential fraud and document falsification. Karen, of course, responded by doubling down. She posted on the Maplewood forum, "Beware misinformation. Mr. Morrison is orchestrating a smear campaign. HOA leadership stands by our authority." I replied publicly, "Authority doesn't mean ownership. And forged signatures don't make property yours, Karen." That post alone racked up 30,000 likes. 2 days later, Karen made her boldest move yet. She called for a community cleanup event, which turned out to be her sneaky way of gathering supporters in front of my ranch for a photo op. 30 people showed up waving Maplewood flags and chanting about protecting the neighborhood. Tommy filmed everything, of course. Miss Whitfield, he asked, microphone in hand, "Why are you hosting a cleanup on property that doesn't belong to the HOA?" She forced a smile. "We're maintaining community standards. Even when it's not your community," he pressed. Her smile cracked. "This interview is over." That clip made national news. By the next morning, federal regulators had called Sarah's office requesting copies of all HOA filings related to the Morrison annexation. Sarah grinned when she told me, "They've opened a formal investigation. You may want to buy popcorn." "Popcorn," I laughed. "I'm buying a truckload." Because by then the tide had fully turned. The internet was on fire, the media was circling, and Karen Whitfield, the woman who tried to sell my land while I buried my father, was running out of lies to hide behind. And I was just getting started. By the time the media circus hit its stride, Karen's empire of control was starting to crack, and she knew it. But she wasn't done scheming. Not yet. One cool Wednesday morning, I woke to the sound of Emma typing furiously at the kitchen table. She had dark circles under her eyes, a coffee mug beside her, and 3 browser tabs opened: the county clerk's website, the HOA registry, and something that made me pause, a state database titled Public Auction Permit Submissions. "Morning detective," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Planning to sue the government before breakfast." She didn't look up. "I'm just proving you raised me right." Meaning the HOA never filed the auction permit. She spun the laptop toward me, scrolling through the data. Every sale in the county has to be logged 30 days in advance with proof of ownership. Maplewood filed nothing. Their supposed auction isn't even legal to advertise. I blinked. "You found that yourself," she shrugged. "It's literally public record. Guess Karen's too busy rehearsing for prison to Google properly." I couldn't help but grin. "Emma, you might have just saved the ranch twice." Within an hour, we were in Deputy Maria's office again. She listened carefully as Emma explained, her tone professional and calm, like she'd been waiting her whole life to outsmart adults. Maria leaned back, impressed. "So you're saying their auction has no legal footing?" "None," Emma replied. "They'd have to prove ownership to the county clerk before they could file a notice. But the deed's in our name. So the HOA can't even start the paperwork." Maria nodded. "That's enough to call their bluff in public. If you want, I'll get a statement from the county clerk confirming it." She did more than that. She called him on speaker. "Jim, it's Maria. Got a question about Maplewood Heights. Did they file an auction permit for parcel 12B? On the other end, a pause, then laughter. "Nope. They tried, but it got rejected immediately. Wrong parcel number and no ownership proof. Total amateur hour." Maria hung up and looked at me. "Well, Jake, looks like your land's as safe as ever. But if you really want to finish this, you'll need a lawyer who eats people like Karen for breakfast." I smiled. Already found one. Sarah Chen arrived later that afternoon, her hair pulled back, a laptop under her arm. She spread out a stack of documents on my dining table: emails, land plats, notarized statements. "Jake," she began, "I've been reviewing everything and I found something even worse." "That's saying a lot," I muttered. She pointed to the boundary maps. "Remember how Karen claimed Maplewood Heights expanded in 2021 to include your ranch? Hard to forget," I said. "Well, I traced the amendment. The HOA board filed a covenant modification with the county. But it was never signed by the county commissioner, never recorded in the land index, and here's the kicker: it includes your forged signature again. Same handwriting. Same fake notary seal." I leaned forward. You're telling me they faked a county-approved boundary extension? Sarah nodded. Exactly. It's a federal offense falsifying land records. If we can prove Karen or one of her board members submitted it, this whole HOA's going down. Emma's eyes lit up. We should expose it, Sarah raised a finger. Carefully. We can't just post it online, not yet. We'll need a paper trail that holds up in court. So what's the move, I asked. She smiled. We build a trap. Step 1. Verify the forgery. Sarah contacted Robert Kumar, the land surveyor whose name appeared on the fraudulent 2022 survey. Within a day, she got him on speaker. Mr. Kumar, this is attorney Sarah Chen. Did you perform any survey on Morrison Ranch last year? No, ma'am, he replied immediately. Never stepped foot there. My name's been popping up in disputes lately, people forging my certification number. Can you send a statement confirming that? Already typing it, he said. When Sarah hung up, she turned to me with a look that could cut steel. That's our smoking gun. Step 2. Follow the money. We discovered Karen's real motive when Sarah dug into Maplewood's financial records. Turns out Karen wasn't just HOA president, she co-owned a private real estate company called Whitfield and Stanton Property Group. Her business partner, the HOA vice president Robert Stanton, and wouldn't you know it, the company had an exclusive contract to list available Maplewood properties, including my ranch for a projected 6% commission, on a property valued at $2. $3 million, that's $138, 0 inches their pockets. Greed disguised as community service. Sarah's voice hardened. They tried to turn your family's legacy into a bonus check. That explains the urgency, I said. They weren't protecting Maplewood, they were padding their wallets. Emma frowned. So what happens now? Now Sarah said we make sure everyone sees it. Tommy helped us again. He set up hidden cameras on the fence line inside the mailbox, even a drone hovering near the HOA office. We filmed Karen holding HOA sale documents, waving them at potential buyers who came snooping. And sure enough, that Friday evening, one of those buyers showed up at my gate, a man in a suit, clipboard in hand. Afternoon, he said politely. I'm here for the open house. Open house, I repeated. What are you buying the cows? He looked confused. Miss. Whitfield said this property was seized due to unpaid dues. She showed me photos. I smirked. You might want to call your lawyer before placing any bids. That land's under federal trust. His eyes widened. Federal, yep, I said. And you're trespassing. He didn't stick around. That evening, Sarah compiled everything into a formal legal brief, affidavits from Kumar Maria's statement, county clerk records, screenshots of Karen's online claims, and even the open house footage Tommy filmed. This, she said, tapping the folder, is an injunction request. Once it's filed, the HOA can't touch your property, not even for mowing the grass. What about criminal charges, I asked. Oh, those come next, she replied. I'm also forwarding everything to the district attorney's office. Document forgery and wire fraud fall under federal jurisdiction. Expect company. But even as we prepared our case, Karen tried one last act of desperation. The night before the auction, floodlights appeared outside my ranch. HOA trucks again, this time carrying banners, tents, and folding chairs. They were actually setting up. I stormed out, phone recording. You planning a barbecue or just another crime scene? Karen, standing in her red blazer and pearls, smiled coldly. You can film all you want, Jake. The HOA voted. The auction proceeds tomorrow. I laughed. Funny thing, the county clerk says otherwise. Her smile faltered. You're bluffing. That's when headlights cut through the darkness, 2 sheriff's cruisers pulling up, blue lights flashing. Deputy Maria stepped out, followed by a taller man in a dark suit flashing a badge. Special Agent Rodriguez, FBI, White-Collar Division, he introduced himself. Karen blinked. The FBI, this is a civil dispute, Rodriguez shook his head. Not anymore. We've received reports of document forgery, wire fraud, and attempted unlawful property seizure. Miss Whitfield, you're to cease all activity pending federal review. Karen's composure melted. This is outrageous. We're an independent association, Rodriguez deadpanned. You're an association under investigation. As the officers dismantled the tents, I stood beside Emma, who whispered, We actually did it. I smiled. Not yet, but the cracks are showing. Behind us, Tommy's drone hovered, capturing every moment, Karen arguing, agents confiscating files, HOA members scattering like pigeons. By morning, that footage would be on every local news channel in Colorado. Karen had tried to sell my legacy behind my back. Now the whole world was watching her lose everything. And the best part, the law had just begun to dig. When the FBI shows up in a small Colorado town, everyone notices. You could feel it in the air, that nervous, heavy silence before a storm. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. FBI launches investigation into Maplewood Heights HOA over forgery and fraud allegations. Karen's smiling photo, the one she used for every community newsletter, was now plastered beside a mugshot-style crop taken from Tommy's drone footage. The caption read, "Local HOA president accused of property scam." It felt unreal. For months I'd been the man under siege, the stubborn rancher fighting off fines, threats, and fake paperwork. Now, for the first time, the ground shifted under her feet. But if I've learned anything from people like Karen Whitfield, it's that arrogance doesn't die quietly. 2 days after the raid, I drove down to the county courthouse to meet Sarah. She looked sharp as always, hair tied back, folder in hand, calm as a winter lake. "They're shaking," she said. "The HOA board's holding an emergency meeting tonight. Stanton and Walsh already lawyering up. And Karen, she still thinks she can talk her way out." Sarah smirked. She tried calling the FBI office this morning. Claimed this was a misunderstanding about community beautification funds. I almost choked on my coffee. Beautification, that woman forged a federal record. "Exactly," Sarah said, "and that's what makes it fun." She opened her laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. "I've been cross-checking HOA transactions for the last year. There's more dozens of vendor payments to a consulting firm that doesn't exist." I traced the routing number. It leads to a private account in Stanton's name. So they were siphoning HOA money too, bingo. I leaned back, exhaling. They didn't just try to steal my ranch. They stole from their own neighbors. Sarah nodded. "That's what gets juries angry, not greed, but betrayal. People hate being conned by the folks they trusted." That evening, the Maplewood Heights clubhouse was packed. The FBI had frozen HOA assets and members wanted answers. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Tommy live-streamed it anyway, hiding his phone in his jacket pocket. Karen walked in late, red-faced, but still clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. "This meeting is to clarify misinformation," she began, voice trembling, just enough to betray her nerves. "Certain online sources have spread false claims about my leadership. I assure you the Maplewood Heights HOA operates with full transparency." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Then why's the FBI in your office?" Karen murmurs spread like wildfire. Karen slammed her gavel. Order. But the crowd was done obeying. Another homeowner, a middle-aged woman named Ruth, stood up holding a printed email. "You fined me $800 for painting my porch beige instead of Maplewood taupe." "Where did that money go?" Karen stammered. "All funds were used for community projects, like buying yourself a Lexus," Ruth snapped. Laughter rippled through the hall. Then Sarah walked in, uninvited but unstoppable. "Good evening, everyone," she said smoothly. "I'm attorney Sarah Chen, representing Mr. Morrison. I'm here to inform you that the HOA's actions regarding the Morrison Ranch have been deemed fraudulent. And based on new evidence, several of your board members may face federal charges." You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's face went white. "You can't just barge in here." "I just did," Sarah said, holding up a folder. "And for transparency, I've already filed a motion with the state property commissioner. The Maplewood Heights HOA charter is now under audit." The room exploded in noise. Stanton tried to speak up. "This is a witch hunt," but was drowned out by homeowners yelling about fines, late fees, broken promises. Patricia Vance, the one decent board member, stood and raised her voice. "I move for an immediate vote to remove Karen Whitfield from office pending investigation." Seconded, Walsh said quietly, tears in her eyes. Karen's jaw dropped. Jennifer but Walsh didn't look at her. "You told me to delete emails, Karen. I saved them instead." Tommy's live stream caught the exact moment Karen realized the walls had closed in. By dawn the next morning, the HOA board had effectively imploded. Karen's lawyer tried to negotiate a deal with the DA's office, administrative oversight they called it, but the FBI wasn't having it. Agent Rodriguez personally called me later that day. "Mr. Morrison thought you'd want to know we've secured a confession from one of the board members. The forgery scheme originated with Miss Whitfield and Mr. Stanton. She signed the fake boundary maps herself." I sat in silence, letting it sink in. "She's being charged with conspiracy, document falsification, and attempted property theft by deception," Rodriguez continued. "We'll be seizing her company's assets as part of restitution." "Justice," I said softly, "for my father, for this land." Rodriguez chuckled. "Don't get too poetic, Jake. You still have a civil suit to win." That suit came sooner than I expected. The county judge, a stern woman named Evelyn Marks, opened proceedings 3 weeks later. The courtroom was small but packed, reporters, homeowners, even local officials who'd once ignored my complaints. Sarah stood tall beside me, sharp and precise. Across the aisle sat Karen and Stanton, looking pale under fluorescent lights. Sarah began her opening statement like a scalpel cutting through silk. "Your Honor, this case isn't about fences or fines. It's about greed, the kind that hides behind paperwork and signatures. My client Jake Morrison buried his father and came home to find his land stolen through a web of lies spun by those who claimed to serve their community." Karen's lawyer objected, claiming emotional manipulation, but the judge waved him off. Then Sarah laid out the evidence: forged deeds, emails coordinating fake auctions, bank transfers from HOA accounts into Whitfield and Stanton LLC. She even played Tommy's drone footage, showing Karen directing workers to post the auction sign on my property. By the time Sarah was done, even Karen's lawyer looked like he wanted to switch sides. When it was my turn to testify, I told it straight, no dramatics, no legal jargon. Just the truth: how my father built that land, how Karen weaponized bureaucracy, and how Emma, 16, grieving her grandpa, filmed grown adults trespassing on our home. When I finished, Judge Marks took off her glasses and said, "Mr. Morrison, I've presided over land disputes for 30 years. This is one of the most brazen abuses of authority I've seen." She turned to Karen. "You didn't just violate property laws. You violated the trust of every person in this county who believed in the system you exploited." Karen tried to speak something about misunderstanding, but the judge silenced her. "Save it for sentencing." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. I could barely take 2 steps without someone shouting, "Jake, how does it feel to win?" I didn't feel like celebrating. Not yet. Because as satisfying as it was to watch Karen squirm, I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about every homeowner bullied by a petty tyrant with a clipboard and too much free time. Later that night, sitting on my porch, I saw the glow of red and blue lights flickering across the distant hills. FBI vehicles. Karen was being escorted out of her Maplewood house in handcuffs. Stanton followed a few minutes later, head down. Tommy's drone caught it all, broadcasting live to hundreds of thousands of viewers. HOA president arrested. Federal agents size files and assets. Emma watched beside me, arms crossed. "You think she'll learn something in prison?" I chuckled. "Maybe how to knit," she smiled. "Good. Maybe she'll make you a thank you scarf." The next morning, I found a handwritten note slipped under my door. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the handwriting: Jennifer Walsh, the former HOA secretary who'd turned whistleblower. "Jake, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. She scared everyone. But you reminded us that the law doesn't belong to people like her, it belongs to the truth. Thank you." I folded the note and tucked it into my father's old journal. Because for the first time in months, the ranch was quiet again. The cattle grazed peacefully. The mailbox stood upright, new paint, same spot. The storm had passed. But the echo of what it uncovered would linger for a long time. And in that silence, I made myself a promise: if Karen thought this was the end, she was wrong. This was just the beginning of holding every HOA bully accountable, one story at a time. The morning after the verdict, the air over Morrison Ranch felt lighter, the kind of crisp, golden air you only get after a long storm finally breaks. For months, the sound of construction trucks, HOA threats, and Karen's shrill voice had haunted these fields. Now all I could hear was the wind brushing through cottonwoods and the low murmur of cattle. The headlines told the story better than I ever could: HOA president pleads guilty to fraud, faces federal prison. Stanton cooperates in exchange for probation. Morrison Ranch officially declared independent property by county. Justice, real tangible justice, had finally arrived. I stood by the fence line that morning with a hammer in one hand and a new sign in the other. The letters were bold and simple: private property, federal land trust registered. Trespassers will be filmed and featured on YouTube. Emma helped me nail it in, laughing as the sound echoed across the field. "You're really going with the YouTube part?" she asked. "Gotta give the people what they want," I said, grinning. Besides, it worked once. It had worked more than once. Tommy's final video, HOA Karen Gets Arrested Live, Rancher Wins Against Fraud, had hit 6 million views. News outlets across the country replayed the moment Karen was led away in handcuffs, her perfect hair undone by the Colorado wind. Even national talk shows picked it up. But for me, the real victory wasn't online. It was right here on this land that 3 generations of my family had built with their bare hands. That afternoon, the county sheriff's office, the FBI, and a few local officials returned for the formal restitution process. Karen's assets, her Lexus, her house, and the bank accounts tied to Whitfield and Stanton properties were being seized. The judge had ordered part of those funds to repay every homeowner she'd ever wronged. And in what I could only describe as poetic justice, the rest was earmarked for something called the Morrison Property Rights Fund, a legal assistance program for victims of HOA abuse. Agent Rodriguez shook my hand. Never thought I'd see an HOA case turn into federal precedent, he said. Congratulations, Mr. Morrison. You didn't just win your ranch back, you set an example. I smiled. Glad to hear it. Maybe next time they'll think twice before fining someone for having a red barn. He laughed. Or cows. The town changed after that. Maplewood Heights, once spotless and smug, had grown quieter. Without Karen's micromanaging tyranny, the new HOA president, Patricia Vance, dissolved half the bylaws and held public meetings for the first time. Homeowners who'd been terrified of speaking up were now free to repaint their houses, plant gardens, and live like human beings again. Patricia even visited me one afternoon. She brought coffee and a sealed envelope. What's this? I asked. The official document from the county, she said. The HOA covenant amendment that Karen faked? It's been nullified. Your land is permanently recognized as separate from Maplewood jurisdiction. I opened the envelope and saw the words I'd fought months to read. Boundary confirmed. Morrison Ranch remains private property. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, trying not to smile too wide. Patricia hesitated. You know, Jake, not everyone in Maplewood was against you. Some of us were just afraid to speak. I'm sorry it took this long. I know, I said, but fear's a powerful thing. So is the truth. She smiled, then added softly, Your daughter's pretty incredible, by the way. She's inspired half the neighborhood kids. They're calling her the HOA hacker. Emma blushed when she heard that later. Please don't let that stick, she groaned. Too late, I said. They're making shirts. A week later, we held a small gathering on the ranch. Nothing fancy, just neighbors, barbecue, and a little live country band by the barn. The banner over the gate read, Ownership Day, celebrating community truth and the right to your own land. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Even the mayor showed up, gave a short speech about individual rights and rural preservation, then handed me a framed copy of the county's final ruling. When I looked closer, I realized the number printed at the bottom, the fine Karen had fabricated, matched perfectly with the funds we'd raised from donations and media revenue, $47,000. We decided to donate it all to the Morrison Property Rights Fund. Full circle. Tommy filmed everything, of course. His next upload was titled, From Ranch to Revolution, How One HOA Got Schooled. It wasn't just a story anymore. It had become a symbol. As the sun set that evening, I walked out to the cottonwood tree where my father was buried. The light filtered through the leaves, golden and quiet. I carried with me the original 1967 deed, the one with my grandfather's faded signature and a few smudges of old oil from his hands. Looks like we won, Dad, I said softly. Took a while, but we got there. The air felt still peaceful. For the first time in years, there wasn't a single HOA notice in sight. Emma came up behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I said, looking out across the fields. Better than okay. Just thinking how close we came to losing it all because someone wanted power more than peace. She smiled faintly. You think people like her ever learn? I shook my head. Maybe. But that's not my problem anymore. We stood there a while, just watching the sun dip behind the hills, painting the ranch in amber light. 2 months later, I got a call from the University of Colorado Law School. They were organizing a symposium on private land rights versus HOA overreach and wanted me to speak. I laughed at first, told them I wasn't exactly the academic type, but they insisted. When I walked onto that stage, weeks later, wearing my old ranch boots and a borrowed blazer, the auditorium was packed. Law students, reporters, even state officials were there. I told them the truth, not the polished legal version, but the human one, about how greed hides behind civility, how bureaucracy can become bullying when it loses sight of its purpose, how sometimes the law isn't a weapon or a shield, it's just a reminder that fairness still matters. I ended with the same words I'd said to Maria months ago when the fight was still fresh. When someone tries to steal what's yours, don't rage, don't panic. Just document, expose, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. The room stood silent for a long moment, then erupted in applause. Today, Morrison Ranch is back to what it always was, a working farm, a quiet home, and a legacy worth fighting for. Emma's heading to college next fall to study law of all things. Property rights, she says. Someone's got to keep the Karens of the world in check. I can't argue with that. Every morning I still take the same walk down to the fence line, the same place where I first saw that cursed for sale HOA auction sign months ago. Now there's only one sign left. Morrison Ranch. Est 1967, family owned. It catches the light just right when the sun rises, And every time I see it, I remember what this whole war was really about. Some things, the land you build, the people you love, the truth you stand by, can't be sold, forged, or stolen. Not by an HOA, not by a fraud, not by anyone. That's the Morrison way. If this story taught me anything, it's that the law means nothing without courage, and courage means little without patience. The system isn't perfect, but when you stand your ground with facts, evidence, and integrity, even the biggest bully eventually collapses under their own lies. There's a Karen in every neighborhood, someone who mistakes control for community, who confuses power with purpose. But there's also a Jake in every story, someone who refuses to bend, who fights with reason instead of rage. I learned that revenge isn't about shouting louder, it's about being right longer. If you've ever been pushed around, fined unfairly, or told you can't fight back, remember this: you can. You just need proof, persistence, and a bit of humor to survive the madness. And when the storm clears, when justice finally catches up, you'll realize something profound. The land you defended isn't just dirt, it's dignity. If you've ever stood up against unfairness, HOA, or otherwise, share your story in the comments. And if you love seeing karma served cold, hit subscribe. Because trust me, this isn't the last HOA story worth telling.